I was removed from my own celebration without anyone touching me, not physically, but with one sentence, my daughter made it clear I was no longer the person she believed deserved a place in her life. It happened right after the first toast. My sister had just lifted her glass, said something about second chances and late love. Guest smiled, nodded politely. I felt my new husband's hand gently graze the back of my chair. The lights were soft. The music, something low and romantic, curled through the room like a sigh. Then Amelia stood. No warning, no hesitation. She wasn't trembling. Her voice didn't crack. She looked calm, composed. Black dress, no jewelry, hair tucked behind one ear. A glass of sparkling water untouched in front of her. "I'm ending the pregnancy," she said, "because I refuse to give birth to a child whose grandfather was once my boyfriend." Silence. Someone coughed. A fork dropped. I heard a chair scrape back too quickly, and the sound of it, that sharp wooden groan, was somehow louder than her words. I didn't move. Couldn't. Harrison didn't either. My fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth, but my face stayed still. I didn't even blink. I was afraid that if I did, the entire room would fall apart. Amelia sat back down, slow and steady, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just dropped a truth so heavy the walls might crack. She didn't look at me. Not once. Just folded her napkin and placed it on her lap like a well-mannered guest. Like a guest, not a daughter. I kept hearing her words, playing over and over again in my head, not loud but precise. Ending the pregnancy, grandfather, boyfriend. Everyone else heard them too. You could feel it the way the air changed. Softer, tighter, like the ballroom was holding its breath. The music didn't stop, not right away, but it didn't matter. No one was listening anymore. I looked across the table and saw my reflection in the wine glass lipstick still perfect, expression unreadable. But inside, I wasn't seated. I was falling. Amelia didn't drink her water. She didn't fidget. She didn't apologize. She had delivered a message, and that was all. A few guests tried to recover, shifting the mood, changing the subject, but the damage was done. The toast had turned into a funeral, not of a marriage, but of illusion. I thought she wouldn't come, that maybe her absence would be punishment enough. But she came, and she made sure no one would mistake her presence for approval. I had told myself she was over him. It had been 2 years. She had moved apartments, changed jobs, started volunteering again. I thought she had let him go. I didn't know she had to. I told myself Harrison and I had started clean, that what happened before didn't matter anymore, that age and time gave us permission. But I never asked if love has borders, or if motherhood has them. And Amelia, my daughter, my blood just showed me exactly where hers begin. Not with shouting, not with drama, just with one sentence, one truth, one perfectly chosen moment. I stayed seated, my hands in my lap. I did not reach for my husband. I did not reach for her. She had already left. Not the room, but the idea of me. And I knew, in that small, cold silence between songs, that nothing I said after this would matter more than what I didn't stop before it. The strange thing was, no one left. No one stood up or screamed or asked her to explain. They just kept sitting, forks idle, eyes fixed anywhere but her face. And yet, the center of gravity in the room had already shifted. I watched Amelia from across the table. She looked peaceful, as if her confession hadn't caused the temperature to drop 10 degrees. As if she hadn't just turned a wedding reception into a courtroom. She was always like that, calm when it hurt the most. Years ago, when her father and I divorced, she didn't throw tantrums. She just moved out before I came home. Left a note on the counter with her forwarding address, written in block letters like a utility bill. I thought she was distant, cold even. But now I wonder if that was the only way she knew how to survive, by shrinking back and turning quiet. After the dinner, after the music was turned off, and the guests wandered into small, awkward circles near the dessert table, I escaped to the hallway. I stood near the gift table, behind a curtain of white hydrangeas, pretending to check my phone. But I was listening. to their voices, their silences. A low hum of discomfort rippling between them like static. No one dared approach Amelia. I spotted her by the window, alone, not scrolling, not pretending, just watching the parking lot below like she was waiting for the sky to change. I knew she wouldn't come to me. Not tonight, maybe not ever again. And I didn't have the courage to go to her, not when I wasn't even sure what I would say. How do you tell your child you fell in love with their past? How do you admit that your loneliness made you blind to the boundary you were crossing? I hadn't planned it, of course. Harrison and I reconnected months after he and Amelia ended things. A chance meeting at a fundraiser, a quick coffee, then another. It didn't feel wrong at first, just unexpected. A second chance at something I thought I'd missed. I told myself it was harmless, that they were adults, that what they had was over. But now I see it wasn't over for her. It had become something else, something unspoken. And I stepped into that silence with heels on and claimed what I thought was available. Maybe I thought she'd forgive me. Maybe I thought she'd even be proud that I found someone again. But what I hadn't considered was how deeply betrayal can settle when it wears the face of someone you once trusted to tuck you in at night. Later, after the last guest had said goodbye and the candles were blown out, Harrison asked if I wanted tea. I said no. He watched me carefully, like he was waiting for me to ask something. I didn't, because I already knew the answer. He hadn't told me he visited her apartment 3 months ago. I hadn't asked, but I'd seen it on the camera app I forgot we both had access to. She never looked surprised to see him. That was the part I couldn't forget. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my dress, the zipper halfway down my back. The room smelled like roses and disappointment. I didn't cry. I just sat still, staring at the bouquet on the nightstand, and realized something awful. The first time Amelia got her heart broken, I told her she was strong, that she'd heal. This time, I was the one who broke it. And I don't think I get to tell her anything anymore. The morning after the wedding, the house was too quiet. I woke up before the sun rose, unsure if I had actually slept. My body felt heavier than usual, like the fabric of the dress I had worn the night before had settled into my bones. Harrison was already up. I heard the low clink of a spoon against ceramic, the faint hum of the kettle. He didn't say good morning, neither did I. There was a plate of toast on the counter, untouched. A mug of tea I hadn't asked for. He was trying, and I didn't know if that made it better or worse. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around the warm cup. But I didn't drink. I stared at the steam curling upward and wondered how long it would take for it to disappear. My phone buzzed once. A message from my sister. She's not answering. Thought you should know. No name needed. We both knew who she meant. I didn't reply. Amelia hadn't stormed out after the announcement. She stayed until dessert was served, then slipped out before the first dance. No goodbyes, no slammed doors, just absence. A clean, quiet erasure. I walked through the living room, past the floral arrangements and empty champagne flutes, the remnants of a celebration that no longer felt like mine. The room was still perfumed with roses and vanilla cake. I found myself staring at the guest book. The open page stopped midway through a sentence. Amelia had signed it. Right below her name, she had written a single sentence. Some boundaries once crossed cannot be redrawn. I traced the ink with my fingertip, like that would make the words mean something else. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't made a scene. But she had spoken. In the most deliberate ways, a sentence at the table, a sentence in a book, like punctuation marks to a story I didn't know she was still writing. I thought back to a conversation we had a year ago. We were sitting on the porch sharing a bowl of cherries. She had just started dating someone new. I don't even remember his name. She had smiled that night, told me how careful she was now, how she didn't trust first dates the way she used to. It's not the red flags, she'd said. It's the yellow ones. The ones you convince yourself are just your imagination. At the time, I thought she was talking about men. Now I think she was warning me. I walked upstairs to her old bedroom. The door hadn't been opened in months. The sheets still tucked, the books still lined up by color, the faint scent of lavender clinging to the pillows. I sat on her bed and looked at the ceiling, remembering how I used to lie here with her when she had nightmares. She never cried, just asked me to stay until the shadows looked softer. That little girl had learned to survive silence, and now she was using it as a shield. Harrison knocked gently on the doorframe. He didn't step in. "She'll come around," he said. I turned my head slowly. "Don't say that." He looked startled. "I mean it," I said. "Don't speak for her, not anymore." He didn't answer, just nodded and left. I stayed on the bed for a long time, long enough for the sun to shift across the window and fall onto the empty side of the mattress. She used to keep a stuffed bear there. I gave it to her when she turned 7. It was still there, tucked into the corner, worn and soft. I didn't touch it. I didn't belong in that space anymore. 3 days after the wedding, a package arrived on the front steps. No return address, no note, just a slim envelope sealed inside a small box, wrapped in plain brown paper. I brought it into the kitchen, set it on the counter beside the wilting flowers, and stared at it like it might open on its own. Harrison didn't ask about it. He'd been keeping his distance, moving through the house like a guest unsure of his welcome. When I finally opened the box, the envelope inside was labeled in handwriting I recognized instantly. Amelia's. It was clean, precise, like everything about her. Inside were 2 things, a printed ultrasound image and a folded document. I touched neither at first, just stared. The ultrasound was from 2 weeks ago. Her name was printed in the top left corner, along with a timestamp I didn't want to look at too long. The document was a form. Termination, confirmation. Date scheduled. Clinic name. A single signature at the bottom. No message, no explanation, just facts. I set it down and pressed both hands against the edge of the counter to steady myself. The marble felt colder than usual. She hadn't said it to provoke. She had meant it. And now, she had handed it to me in the most surgical way possible. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. I stood there a long time, letting the silence settle around me like dust. I remembered her as a little girl, bringing home drawings from school. She used to tape them to the fridge herself carefully, one at a time, never crooked. This felt like that, like another thing she needed me to see, but wouldn't say aloud. Later that afternoon, I found Harrison in the garage, rearranging storage bins like something in the chaos could be controlled. I handed him the envelope without a word. He looked through it quickly, too quickly, then folded everything back up and set it on the workbench like it was just another bill. "She followed through," he said quietly. "She warned us. I corrected." He didn't respond. We didn't talk about it that night, but something shifted. By morning, I started noticing gaps, empty hangers in the closet, drawers no longer full. Things that once belonged to Harrison were disappearing one by one. Not rushed, not panicked, just removed. Like he knew he didn't belong here anymore, but hadn't decided how to say it yet. That evening, I found him standing outside her bedroom. The door was closed, the hallway dim. He didn't knock, just stood there. I didn't speak either. I watched him from the stairs, wondering if guilt felt the same for him as it did for me, like weight strapped to your back, invisible but constant. Eventually, he walked away. I stepped into her room again. The envelope was still on the nightstand where I'd left it. I sat beside it and read every word again. Slowly, word by word, like a sentence could unravel what we had done, but it didn't. There was a picture frame on her shelf I hadn't noticed before, a photo of her and Harrison, taken 2 years ago. They were standing in front of a bookstore, smiling, his arm around her shoulders. I picked it up. Behind the photo, written in tiny handwriting on the backing board, were 6 words. "He said you'd never find out." My breath caught. Not from shock, from recognition. Because deep down, I already had. I didn't sleep that night, not because of what was in the photo frame, but because of what wasn't. There was no dust on it, no fading, no forgotten corner of a drawer. That picture had been touched recently, looked at, kept close. And the handwriting behind it, those 6 words, felt like a final page someone had left open just for me. He said you'd never find out. I kept repeating it in my head, not as an accusation, as a translation. Translation of everything Harrison hadn't said, of everything Amelia had carried alone. That morning, he made coffee like he always did. 2 cups. One for him, one for me. Except I didn't touch mine. He stood at the sink, looking out into the yard, like the overgrown hedges might give him a sign. I stayed seated, both hands in my lap. "You knew," I said. He didn't turn around. "How long?" I asked. Silence. "Did you see her while we were together? After we got engaged?" Still nothing. I stood and placed the photo frame on the counter. He turned then, slowly. His face didn't change. "She called me, a few months ago, before the wedding." I waited. "She asked if I had feelings for you. I told her I didn't, not in that way, not anymore." "Was that true?" I asked. He didn't answer. I stepped closer, my voice low, level. "Did you love her?" "I did," he said. "And me?" His pause was too long. "I thought I could," he said finally. It wasn't rage I felt. It was subtraction. Something pulling itself out of me, one slow piece at a time. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, barefoot, still in the sweatshirt I slept in. I drove. Nowhere far. Just enough to let the silence between us stretch until it felt like distance. I parked in front of Amelia's apartment building. I didn't go inside. Just sat there, behind the wheel, hands trembling slightly against the cold leather. I imagined her upstairs, alone. Maybe still in pajamas. Maybe pretending this whole thing was just another closed chapter. I thought about calling her. Not to explain. There was no explanation that would matter now. Just to say something true. Something that wasn't wrapped in the language of mothers or apologies. But I didn't, because I realized this wasn't my moment to fix. It was hers to survive. When I returned home, Harrison's car was gone. I didn't ask where. I just walked to the hallway closet, pulled out the box I had kept sealed for over a year. Inside were all the things I thought we'd one day share: travel plans, insurance papers, a will I hadn't finished drafting. At the very bottom was a letter Amelia wrote me on my birthday last year. It said, "I don't always understand your choices, but I always wanted to." That line haunted me now. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being someone she wanted to understand, and started becoming someone she had to protect herself from. I folded the letter back, gently, and placed it in a separate envelope. This time, it would be me who sent something. No message, no explanation, just a photo of the frame and what was written behind it. She didn't reply. Not to the envelope, not to the photo, not even a read receipt. 3 days passed. I checked the mailbox more than I should have, stared at my phone until the screen dimmed, reread old messages just to remember how her tone used to sound when she still spoke to me with warmth. But silence has a way of becoming louder the longer it stretches. It was noon on a Thursday when I received the call. Unknown number. A woman's voice. "This is Nicole from Safe Care Clinic. We just wanted to confirm that Amelia has authorized you to pick up her discharge paperwork if she isn't available by the end of the week." I froze. Sorry, I wasn't aware. She listed you as backup contact. We don't usually share details, but since the form is already signed, just letting you know it's ready." I managed a quiet thank you and ended the call. She had written my name, even now. Even after everything, I didn't know what that meant. Mercy? Habit? A thread she hadn't yet cut? I drove to the clinic later that afternoon, unsure what to expect. The waiting room was small, quiet. Magazines no one was reading. A soft scent of sanitizer and something artificial vanilla, maybe. They handed me a sealed envelope. Inside were 3 documents and a handwritten note from the counselor. Nothing medical. Just a sentence. "She asked that we remind you this was not done in anger." I sat in my car for nearly an hour after that, reading the sentence again and again. Not in anger. She was never angry. She was precise, still, measured. Even her grief came folded, sealed, and sent without ceremony. I drove home, clutching the envelope like it might vanish. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet. Harrison's shoes were gone from the doorway, his coat no longer on the rack. It felt like a reset, as if someone had walked through and pressed delete on everything that didn't belong. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter, then opened her bedroom door. It still smelled faintly of lavender and clean linen. I walked in and sat on the edge of her bed, the same place I'd folded baby clothes 2 decades earlier, the same mattress where she once told me about her first heartbreak. The silence in the room was softer here. I remembered something from years ago when she was 9, maybe 10. She'd lost a school competition, came home furious. Not because she lost, but because the teacher gave the prize to someone who had cheated. She didn't cry. She took out her workbook, flipped to the last page, and wrote a full paragraph titled, "What Fairness is Supposed to Feel Like." She gave it to me without a word. I taped it to the fridge. And that night, I baked her favorite cookies. Not as comfort, but as acknowledgement. I thought of that now. How early she had learned to package pain into facts. How I had praised her for being strong when really, she was just trying to be seen. I took a clean sheet of paper from the desk drawer and began writing not to fix anything, not to defend myself. Just to tell her the truth, I should have said long before any of this started. I didn't fall in love behind your back, I wrote. I just fell too far to see what I was stepping over. I didn't mail the letter. Not because I changed my mind, but because writing it made me realize she didn't need more words from me. She needed space where I stopped trying to narrate and started listening. So I placed it in a box along with the ultrasound, the counselor's note, the photo frame, all of it, not as evidence, as record. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house felt hollow but not cruel, just emptied of pretense. I made coffee for one, took it to the dining table where our family used to sit for Sunday breakfasts, the same table where Amelia once made place cards for Thanksgiving when she was 12. She had written Mom in cursive, dotted the I with a heart. Now there was just steam rising from a chipped mug and silence folding around me like a coat too tight. I kept thinking of the line in the counselor's note, this was not done in anger. She had drawn her boundary not as punishment, but as clarity. She didn't need revenge. She needed distance. And for the first time, I saw the difference. Mid-morning, a text came through. One line, from her. Please don't come today. No greeting, no punctuation, just that. It was the date listed on the termination form. I had memorized it even though I told myself I wouldn't. I sat with the phone in my hand for a full minute, then typed, I won't, but I'm thinking of you. I stared at it, then deleted the last sentence. Typed again. Understood. Then hit send. I didn't expect a reply. None came. But for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like it was splintering every time I breathed. Later that evening, I drove to the edge of town. There was a park Amelia used to love as a child. Swings too tall for her then. A fountain she once slipped into trying to catch coins. I used to bring her here on Saturdays with a thermos of apple juice and a book in my bag I never got to finish. I sat on a bench near the far end of the path, just under a half-dead elm tree she used to call hers. The sky was the color of a bruised gray layered over purple, like dusk wasn't ready to let go of the day. I stayed until the wind picked up, sharp and restless. Then I opened my purse and pulled out the folded letter I hadn't sent. I didn't read it again. Just held it in my hands, then tore it once clean, straight, down the middle. The sound was softer than I expected, like fabric. I didn't scatter the pieces. I didn't bury them. I just tucked them back into my coat pocket, stood, and walked to the car. When I got home, the porch light was still off. No shadows in the hallway. No shoes in the entryway. The emptiness didn't ache this time. It just existed. I went upstairs, pulled the photo from the guest room shelf, and slid it into a drawer. Not to forget, but to stop reliving. That night, before I turned off the light, I whispered into the dark, I was wrong. Not for her to hear, for me to admit. And that changed something, even if only inside me. 2 weeks passed, no messages, no new mail, no knock at the door. Each day moved like fog, slow, soundless, untouchable. I stopped waiting for an apology. From her, from Harrison, from myself. Some fractures don't want to be mended. They just want to be named. I spent most mornings in the garden, pulling weeds, watering what hadn't bloomed, moving without thinking, hands buried in dirt that didn't judge. On the 15th day, a letter arrived, handwritten, my name on the front, the ink just slightly smudged, like someone had hesitated before putting it in the mailbox. No return address. I carried it inside and sat at the kitchen table, the one that still bore faint wax stains from her 6th birthday candles. I didn't open it right away. I studied the handwriting. Still Amelia's, still hers. Just slightly tighter, like she wasn't sure how much space to give her own voice. Then I unfolded the page. 4 lines. I won't forget what happened. But I'm not trying to punish you. I just need to remember how to be your daughter, without forgetting how to be myself. I read it twice, 3 times. By the 4th, the words had settled into the room like light through sheer curtains. Not forgiveness, not closure. Just the beginning of something realer than both. I didn't cry. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the wedding band I no longer wore. That night, I didn't set a place for Harrison at the table. I didn't expect him back. The silence no longer felt temporary. It felt earned. After dinner, I pulled out the box, the one filled with what she'd left behind. The ultrasound, the note from the clinic, the photograph. I added the letter to it, then closed the lid. Not to forget, to mark the line between what was done and what still needed tending. 2 days later, I saw her. Not in person, a news article, local event. Fundraiser for a literacy program downtown. Her name listed as a volunteer. There was a photo. She looked the same, only lighter. Not happier, just less braced. Like the armor had loosened just enough for her to keep breathing. I stared at that picture longer than I meant to. Not because I missed her, because I was proud. Proud she had held her line. Proud she had chosen herself, even when it cost her the map back to me. That evening I cleaned out the spare bedroom, folded sheets, boxed up Harrison's remaining things, took down the photo we once framed together of that first weekend trip. I didn't rip it, didn't burn it, just slid it behind the dresser, face down. I went to bed early. No music, no calls, just a single sentence replaying in my mind like a pulse. She still wrote to me. That was enough. Not as a mother. As a woman who had finally learned that some love survives not in reunion but in restraint. Spring came slowly that year. The trees along our street bloomed late, as if the season wasn't quite convinced it was welcome. I spent mornings in the garden again, not just for the silence, but because things there still followed rules. Roots grew if you fed them. Leaves turned if you watched the light. Life, in its most obedient form. Inside the house, I had moved on to rearranging drawers, folding towels, replacing curtains that had gathered dust during all those months I was busy pretending everything was fine. One afternoon, while clearing the hall closet, I found her umbrella, yellow, folded neatly. The handle still scratched from the time she dropped it chasing the bus in high school. I ran my hand across it, thumb catching the groove in the wood. She never replaced it, said it worked just fine. I set it by the door, where it used to live, not because I thought she'd come by, but because it felt wrong somehow for it to stay hidden. That evening, as I watered the houseplants, my phone buzzed. Amelia. No message. Just a photo. A bookstore. Familiar. Then another photo. A bench outside the store. One I knew well. The place where I'd first seen them together, her and Harrison, years ago. Then a third. The bench again. Empty. But different. A small sticky note taped to the backrest. I zoomed in. 4 words in her handwriting. Not all chapters close. I sat down on the couch, phone in hand, heart not racing but steady. She wasn't reaching out to talk. She was showing me something. That she remembered. That she had returned. Not to him, not to us, but to herself. And that was her way of letting me see the distance she'd traveled. I replied with a single photo in return. The umbrella. No caption. Just the thing she once carried through storms. The next day, a package arrived. Small, no note. Inside, a book. The same title she used to keep by her bed when she was 16, underlined in pencil on the first page. Some roots aren't meant to return where they began, but they still remember the soil. I placed it on the kitchen shelf, right next to the chipped mug I had kept, even after Harrison left. Amelia hadn't come home, but she had started making space. For me, carefully, without promise, but with intention. Later that week, I passed by her apartment building on the way to the market. I didn't stop. I didn't linger. I didn't text. Because now I understood. This wasn't a story where the mother is forgiven in a single hug. This was one where the daughter gets to draw the pace, the map, the silence, and where the mother finally respects that distance without trying to erase it. I reached the grocery store just as the sun broke through the clouds. Soft, pale, unsure, like something was learning how to warm again. And for the first time in months, I let it touch me. It's been 5 months since the wedding. No one brings it up anymore. Not even my sister, who used to find polite ways to ask if Amelia had softened. But I know softness isn't what comes next. Not here. It's something else. One afternoon, while organizing the attic, I found an old photo album, the kind with plastic pages and handwritten labels. Most of it was from the early years Amelia's first steps, birthdays with store-bought cakes, a trip to Arizona we barely afforded. I found a picture of her at 9 years old, arms crossed, standing at the edge of a lake, refusing to smile. I remember that day clearly. She wanted to build a sandcastle. Her father told her the shore was too muddy. She didn't argue. She just stood there, waiting for the tide to rise. That photo said more than her words ever did. She has always known how to wait out disappointment. It's just that back then, I was the one she waited for. Now, she waits for no one. And I'm the one learning how not to fill the silence with my own voice. I closed the album and made tea. That evening, I sent her a message. Nothing big, just a picture of the lake. No caption. She didn't reply. But 2 days later, I saw that she had changed her profile photo. The bookstore again. Same bench. Only this time, she was sitting on it alone, reading. I stared at the image for a long time. Not because I wanted to be part of it, but because I was finally okay not being. There's a kind of healing that doesn't show up in big gestures. It arrives quietly when you stop trying to fix what hurt you and start understanding why it did. Amelia didn't owe me forgiveness. She owed herself peace. And now, I see that was always the point. Some people leave to punish, others leave to rebuild. She left so she could become someone I no longer had the power to disappoint. And the truth is, that's what being a parent sometimes means. Not guiding, not correcting, just stepping back quietly so the person you raised can rise without needing your permission. If you've followed this story, maybe you're carrying your own version of silence. Maybe it looks different. Maybe it's not your daughter. Maybe it's a mother you stopped calling, or a brother who never understood you, or someone you thought would come back. Whatever it is, I hope you find the strength to let go without bitterness. Not all endings are failures. Some are just boundaries finally honored. If this story made you feel seen even just a little, consider following Anna's stories. Not because you need more stories like this, but because sometimes, in hearing someone else's silence, we remember how to listen to our own.